The beam of Olivia Hayes's flashlight cut through the darkness of the ancient tomb, illuminating hieroglyphs that hadn't been seen by human eyes for over 3,000 years. Dust particles danced in the light as she carefully brushed away centuries of sand from a peculiar stone slab. "Professor Hayes? Should we call it a day?" Her assistant, Daniel, stood at the entrance of the chamber, his silhouette framed by the fading daylight outside. "Just a bit longer," Olivia replied, her voice echoing off the limestone walls. "There's something different about these markings." At 32, Olivia had already made a name for herself in archaeological circles. With her copper-brown hair pulled back in a practical braid and her keen gray eyes, she had the focused look of someone who could piece together a civilization from pottery shards and wall carvings. This dig in the remote deserts of southern Jordan was supposed to be routine, document, catalog, preserve. But what she'd found was anything but routine. The hieroglyphs shifted beneath her touch, seeming to rearrange themselves in the dancing light. Olivia blinked, attributing the illusion to fatigue. She'd been working 16-hour days for weeks now. "Daniel, bring me the translation kit," she called out, not taking her eyes off the stone. As she waited, her fingers traced the outline of a small indentation in the center of the slab. It was perfectly circular, about the size of her palm. "Here you go, Professor." Daniel handed her the case containing her reference guides and digital imaging equipment. Olivia nodded her thanks and began photographing the hieroglyphs, section by section. "You can head back to camp. I won't be far behind." After Daniel left, the silence in the tomb was absolute. Olivia worked methodically, cross-referencing symbols against known texts. The language was familiar yet different, a dialect of ancient Egyptian she hadn't encountered before. "Guardian of the Threshold," she translated aloud. "Keeper of the Sacred Bond. This isn't just a burial chamber. It's some kind of temple." Another hour passed before she deciphered enough to understand. The slab was a door, and the indentation was a keyhole. According to the text, only a worthy guardian could open it by placing their hand in the impression and pledging an oath of protection. "Ridiculous," Olivia muttered to herself. "These superstitions have kept locals away for centuries, but they won't stop proper scientific research." Still, a part of her, the part that had led her to archaeology in the first place, thrilled at the mysticism of it all. On impulse, she placed her hand in the indentation. "I, Olivia Hayes, promise to protect whatever lies beyond this door," she said, her tone half serious, half amused at her own theatrics. The stone beneath her palm grew warm. Then hot. Before she could pull away, the slab shifted, revealing a small compartment. Inside lay a necklace, a delicate gold chain with a crystal pendant that seemed to hold a swirl of blue mist. "Impossible," she whispered, reaching for it with trembling fingers. The moment she touched the pendant, the blue mist expanded, filling the chamber. Olivia stumbled back, her heart pounding. The mist coalesced into the translucent form of a woman in ancient garb. "You have made the pledge," the apparition said, her voice like wind through reeds. "I am Talia, bound to this artifact for 1,000 years." Olivia's scientific mind raced for explanations: hallucination from tomb gases, exhaustion, perhaps even an elaborate hologram left by looters. But none of these explained the impossible woman before her. "This isn't real," Olivia said firmly. "Your disbelief changes nothing," Talia replied. "Your promise is binding. The artifact must be protected, or great suffering will follow." A sudden rumble shook the tomb. Sand began pouring in from cracks in the ceiling. "The storm has turned this way," Talia said urgently. "Take the pendant and leave now." Olivia hesitated only a moment before grabbing the necklace and her equipment. She ran through the collapsing passage, chunks of stone falling around her. Outside, the sky had turned an ominous amber, and wind whipped sand into threatening clouds. Daniel and the rest of the team were rushing to secure the camp. Professor! We need to evacuate. Daniel shouted over the howling wind. Olivia clutched the pendant tightly, feeling it pulse against her palm like a heartbeat. As they raced toward the vehicles, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. That night, as the storm raged outside their shelter in the nearby town, Olivia examined the pendant by lamplight. The blue mist inside seemed to follow her movements. I don't believe in curses or spirits, she whispered to the necklace. The pendant warmed in response, and in her mind, she heard Talia's voice clearly, it matters not what you believe, guardian. A promise is a promise. Olivia slipped the chain around her neck, telling herself it was to keep the artifact safe. But as she drifted into an uneasy sleep, she couldn't deny that her rational world had been irrevocably changed. And somewhere in the darkness, Talia watched over her new guardian, knowing the trials that lay ahead. 6 months after the Jordan expedition, Olivia sat in her university office, surrounded by stacks of research papers and artifacts carefully labeled and catalogued. Outside, autumn rain pelted against the windows of Boston University's archaeology department. The pendant hung around her neck, hidden beneath her blouse, a constant reminder of that strange day in the desert. She'd told no one about Talia or the vision in the tomb. The official report mentioned only a significant jewelry find of unknown ceremonial purpose. The pendant had passed authentication tests and carbon dating placed it around 1200 BCE, making it a remarkable discovery but not unprecedented. What was unprecedented was the way it glowed at night, casting eerie blue shadows across her bedroom walls. Or how she sometimes caught glimpses of Talia in reflective surfaces, a fleeting image gone when she turned to look directly. A knock at her door broke her concentration. "Come in," Olivia called, quickly tucking the pendant further out of sight. Professor Nathan Reed entered, bringing with him the scent of rain and coffee. Tall and broad-shouldered with salt and pepper hair, Nathan had been her mentor during her doctoral studies and now served as the department head. "Burning the midnight oil again, Hayes?" he asked, setting a cup of coffee on her desk. "It's nearly 9. Olivia rubbed her eyes. "Just finalizing the Jordan report." Nathan peered at the photographs spread across her desk. "These hieroglyphs are extraordinary. The dialect variations could rewrite our understanding of cultural exchange in the Bronze Age." "That's what I'm hoping," Olivia said, taking a sip of coffee. "And the pendant?" Nathan asked casually. "Have you made progress with it?" Olivia felt a sudden warmth against her chest, the pendant heating in warning. Since returning from Jordan, she'd grown accustomed to these silent communications. "Not much," she lied. "The composition is standard for the period." Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly. Strange that such an ordinary piece would be kept in such an elaborate hiding place. Ancient people were superstitious, Olivia replied with a shrug that she hoped appeared nonchalant. "Indeed." Nathan picked up one of the photographs. "I'd love to examine it sometime. My expertise in metallurgy might reveal something your tests missed." The pendant burned hotter, and Olivia heard Talia's voice in her mind, "He must not touch it." "Your promise, guardian." "Perhaps later," Olivia said, gathering the photographs into a folder. "It's still being processed by conservation." Nathan nodded, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course." "Well, don't stay too late." After he left, Olivia locked her door and pulled out the pendant. "What was that about?" she whispered. The blue mist swirled, and Talia's form materialized beside her desk, more solid than she had appeared in the tomb but still translucent around the edges. "He seeks the power within the artifact," Talia said, her ancient eyes full of concern. "I sense his desire." "Nathan is a respected academic," Olivia argued. "He just wants to study it." "Many have sought to study the eye of Anuket over the centuries," Talia replied. "Few with pure intentions. Your promise was to protect it." Olivia sighed, leaning back in her chair. Over the months, she'd had many such conversations with Talia, learning bits and pieces about the spirit's past as a temple priestess who had been bound to the pendant, the Eye of Anuket, as punishment for a forbidden love affair with a foreign prince. "I can't keep it hidden forever," Olivia said. "That's not how archaeology works. Findings need to be shared, analyzed, exhibited." "Some things were buried for a reason," Talia countered, her form flickering with emotion. That night, Olivia dreamed of the ancient world, of temples and rituals, of a civilization that understood the thin veil between worlds. She saw Talia alive, dancing in ceremonial robes, then weeping as priests chanted spells that bound her essence to the crystal pendant. She awoke to find Nathan standing over her desk, the pendant in his hand. Olivia gasped, disoriented. She must have fallen asleep in her office. "Fascinating artifact," Nathan said smoothly. "The blue substance inside, not quite liquid, not quite gas. I've never seen anything like it." "Put it down," Olivia said, her voice sharper than intended. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Territorial, aren't we? I thought we were colleagues." "We are. But that hasn't been properly documented yet." With obvious reluctance, Nathan placed the pendant on her desk. "I'm leading an exhibition to the British Museum next month. A piece like this would be the highlight." The pendant pulsed visibly now, the blue mist agitated. "I'll consider it," Olivia said carefully. After he left again, Talia appeared, her form more substantial than ever, her expression frantic. "You must not let him take it," she pleaded. "The eye contains ancient magic that can be corrupted. That is why I was bound to it, to ensure it never fell into the wrong hands." "He's just a professor," Olivia insisted, though doubt had begun to creep in. "He is more than that," Talia whispered. "I saw recognition in his eyes when he held the pendant. He knows what it is." As if to confirm Talia's fears, Olivia's computer chimed with an email notification. It was from Nathan, with a single attachment, a scan of an ancient papyrus showing the Eye of Anuket surrounded by hieroglyphs that translated to, "Power over the veil between worlds." Olivia's blood ran cold. How long had Nathan been researching this? How much did he know? Talia placed a semi-transparent hand on Olivia's shoulder. "The promise you made was not just words, Guardian. It was a binding oath. And now it will be tested." The following weeks transformed Olivia's academic life into a careful game of avoidance and half-truths. She kept the Eye of Anuket with her at all times, sleeping with it under her pillow and showering with it hanging just outside the curtain. Nathan's increased interest manifested in casual drop-ins to her office and invitations to collaborate that she politely deflected. "You're being paranoid," she told herself one evening as she worked late in the university's research lab, analyzing microscopic scratches on the pendant's back that appeared to be additional hieroglyphs. "It is not paranoia when the threat is real," Talia replied, her form materializing beside the electron microscope. In the past weeks, the spirit had become increasingly corporeal, able to move small objects if she concentrated hard enough. "I've known Nathan for years," Olivia said, adjusting the microscope's focus. "He mentored me through my dissertation." "Perhaps that is why he waited until you found the eye," Talia suggested. "He knew you would succeed where others had failed." Before Olivia could respond, the lab door opened. She quickly tucked the pendant into her shirt, but relaxed when she saw it was only Veronica, a graduate student. "Professor Hayes? There's a call for you at the front desk. Professor Reed says it's urgent, something about your Jordan permits being questioned." Olivia frowned. "Did he say who was questioning them?" Veronica shook her head. "Just that you should come quickly." After Veronica left, Talia's expression turned grave. "It is a trap." "That's ridiculous," Olivia said, though uncertainty colored her voice. "Then leave the eye here while you answer this urgent call." Olivia hesitated, torn between logical skepticism and the growing trust she felt toward Talia. "Fine," she finally said, slipping the necklace off and locking it in her specimen drawer. "I'll be right back." The research building was quiet at this hour, most students and faculty having departed hours ago. Olivia's footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as she made her way to the front desk. There was no receptionist on duty, nor any sign of Nathan. A chill of realization ran down her spine. She turned and ran back toward the lab. The door was ajar, the lock forced. Inside, Nathan stood at her workstation, the specimen drawer open and empty, the pendant clutched in his hand. He looked up at her entrance, not even attempting to hide his actions. "Ah, Olivia. I was hoping to be gone before you returned." His voice was calm, conversational even, as if he were discussing lecture notes rather than theft. "What are you doing?" Olivia demanded, though the answer was painfully obvious. Nathan smiled, holding the pendant up to the light. The blue mist inside swirled violently. "Claiming what should have been mine decades ago. Did you think you were the first to find one of these?" Confusion momentarily replaced Olivia's anger. "What do you mean?" "Tunis, 1998. I found an identical pendant in a buried temple. But before I could properly study it, it was taken from me." His expression darkened with old rage. "I've spent 25 years searching for another, tracking myths and legends across 3 continents. So you used me," Olivia said, the pieces falling into place. "The department funding, the expedition location, you orchestrated all of it." Nathan shrugged. "I needed someone with your particular talents. Your intuitive approach to translation, your disregard for conventional interpretations. And I was right, you found what I couldn't." He slipped the pendant into his pocket. "The private collector I've arranged to meet values discretion above all. The eye will disappear into his collection, but my research will be funded for the rest of my career." "You can't do this," Olivia said, stepping forward. "That artifact belongs to the archaeological record, to history." Nathan laughed bitterly. "This is far more than an artifact, as I think you've discovered. The ancients knew how to harness energies we've forgotten. The eye is a conduit to those powers." As if responding to his words, the pendant began to glow through the fabric of his pocket. The blue light intensified until it filled the room, and Talia appeared between them, her form now fully visible even to Nathan. His eyes widened. "The guardian spirit," he whispered. "So it's true." "Release the eye," Talia commanded, her voice echoing with otherworldly authority. Instead of showing fear, Nathan's face lit with triumph. "Magnificent. Do you understand what this means, Olivia? Proof of spiritual entities, of magic itself. The eye is not meant for human exploitation," Talia said, advancing toward him. "Its power maintains the balance between worlds." Nathan backed toward the door. "I've waited too long to be deterred by threats from a ghost." "Stop him," Talia pleaded, turning to Olivia. "You made a promise." "Nathan, please," Olivia tried, changing tactics. "We can study it together, publish together. And share the glory?" "I don't think so." Nathan reached the doorway. "Don't follow me, Olivia. Your career depends on my goodwill." As he turned to leave, Talia made a desperate gesture. A nearby beaker shattered, sending glass across the floor. Nathan stumbled, momentarily startled, and Olivia seized the opportunity to lunge forward, grabbing for his pocket. They grappled briefly, Nathan's greater strength giving him the advantage until Talia swept research papers into the air around them, creating a momentary distraction. Olivia's fingers closed around the pendant, but as she pulled it free, Nathan seized her wrist. "You don't understand what you're interfering with," he hissed. The pendant began to pulse between them, the blue light turning violet, then crimson. The temperature in the room plummeted, frost forming on the windows despite the summer heat outside. "What's happening?" Olivia gasped, her breath visible in the suddenly frigid air. "The barrier weakens," Talia said, her form flickering like a bad transmission. "The eye responds to conflict, to divided intentions." Nathan's grip tightened. "Give it to me." "I promise to protect it," Olivia said, as much to herself as to him. With a surge of determination, she twisted away, breaking his hold. The pendant flew from their grasp, arcing through the air before clattering against the far wall. A crack appeared in the crystal, and the red light burst outward in a concussive wave that knocked them both off their feet. When Olivia regained her senses, Nathan was gone, and with him, the eye of Anuket. A smear of blood on the floor led to the door. Talia stood in the center of the room, her form fading in and out of visibility. "He's corrupted it," she said, her voice distant and broken like a failing radio signal. "If he completes the ritual of binding, he will harness my essence and the eye's power for himself." Olivia struggled to her feet. What ritual? Where would he go? To a place of power. A nexus point. Talia's form stabilized slightly. "We must find him before the next full moon, 3 days hence, or all will be lost." Olivia thought of Nathan's words, a private collector, a meeting already arranged. "We need to track him down, now." As they left the ransacked lab, Olivia felt the weight of her promise more keenly than ever. This was no longer about academic integrity or even preserving history. Something ancient and powerful had been set in motion, and she was the only one who could stop it. "He's gone to London," Olivia said, hanging up the phone in her apartment. It was nearly dawn, and she had spent the night calling contacts, cashing in favors, and following the electronic trail of Nathan's hasty departure. A red-eye flight 3 hours ago. Talia hovered near the window, her form growing more transparent with each passing hour. Without the physical connection to the eye of Anuket, her presence in the mortal world was fading. "The British Museum," she whispered. "He spoke of an exhibition there." Olivia nodded, throwing essential items into a backpack. "The Eternal Egypt Showcase opens tomorrow night. Exclusive, invitation only. The perfect cover to meet with a private collector." "How will we gain entry?" Talia asked. Olivia held up her phone, displaying an email. "I'm still listed as a consulting expert. My invitation was confirmed weeks ago." 3 hours later, Olivia was on a plane bound for Heathrow, her mind racing through contingency plans. In the seat beside her, visible only to her, Talia sat in contemplative silence. "You should rest," the spirit said eventually. "The confrontation ahead will require strength." "I can't sleep," Olivia replied quietly, grateful for the empty seat that allowed her to speak without appearing to talk to herself. "Tell me more about the eye. What exactly is Nathan trying to do?" Talia's gaze turned distant. "The eye was created during the reign of Pharaoh Seti I as a bridge between the mortal realm and the divine. Priestesses like myself were bound to these artifacts, our life force serving as anchors for the magic." "But why?" Olivia pressed. "What purpose did these bridges serve?" "Communication with the gods, primarily. Glimpses of possible futures. Healing that would seem miraculous by your standards." Talia's form flickered. "But there were those who discovered another use, channeling the divine power for themselves, corrupting it to bend reality to their will. And that's what Nathan intends." Talia nodded. "The binding ritual would transfer my essence fully into the physical world but under his control. With the power of the eye and the knowledge of a being who has existed for 3,000 years. He could rewrite history," Olivia finished, understanding dawning. "Academic acclaim would just be the beginning." "Indeed. The temptation of such power has driven many to madness," Talia said softly. "It is why guardians like yourself were chosen, those with the strength to resist." Olivia laughed humorlessly. I'm not strong. I'm just an archaeologist who made a promise I didn't understand. Talia's semi-transparent hand hovered over Olivia's. Yet you still honor it. That is strength, Guardian. When they arrived in London, the city was shrouded in fog, the kind of thick, atmospheric haze that seemed to blur the lines between past and present. It was fitting weather for their pursuit, Olivia thought as she checked into a hotel near the British Museum. Nathan will have the advantage, she said, pacing the small room. He knows we're coming, and he has connections here. But he does not understand the eye fully, Talia countered. The crack in the crystal has destabilized its energy. I can sense its disturbance even now, calling to me. Olivia paused. You can track it? Not precisely. But I can feel its general direction and proximity. Talia closed her eyes. It is near. Within this city. The next evening, Olivia stood at the entrance of the British Museum, dressed in a sleek black gown that concealed sensible shoes and a set of lock picks, a skill acquired during fieldwork in remote locations where replacement keys were non-existent. Her invitation was scanned without issue, and she entered the transformed Great Court. Egyptian artifacts gleamed under carefully positioned spotlights. Scholars and benefactors in formal attire mingled among displays of canopic jars and funerary masks. Waiters circulated with champagne and canapés. It was the kind of event Olivia normally avoided, preferring dust and discovery to academic pageantry. Do you see him? Talia asked, barely visible in the bright lights. Olivia scanned the crowd. Not yet. Stay close. She moved through the exhibition methodically, exchanging brief pleasantries with colleagues while searching for Nathan. The main showcase area revealed nothing, nor did the adjacent galleries. He's not here, Olivia murmured, frustration mounting. The eye is closer, Talia insisted. Beneath us. Understanding flashed through Olivia's mind. The conservation labs. In the basement. Using her consultant credentials, Olivia slipped past security to the restricted stairwell. As they descended, Talia's form grew more solid, her glow providing light in the dimly lit passage. The ritual has begun, Talia said urgently. I can feel the pull. The conservation area was a labyrinth of climate-controlled rooms. Olivia followed Talia's increasingly agitated movements until they reached a secured door marked Special Collections, authorized personnel only. Beyond the door, a chanting voice echoed. Nathan's voice. How do we get in? Talia asked. Olivia removed the lock picks from her hidden pocket. The old-fashioned way. The lock yielded after tense minutes of manipulation. Olivia eased the door open to reveal Nathan standing in a circle of candles, the eye of Anuket suspended in a specially constructed stand before him. The crack in the crystal had widened, leaking tendrils of blue mist that coalesced into shapes before dissipating. Beside Nathan stood an older man with cold eyes and the unmistakable bearing of wealth without accountability. The collector, Olivia whispered. Nathan continued his chant, reading from a papyrus that Olivia recognized from the Jordan excavation, another artifact he must have secretly removed. The eye pulsed with increasing intensity, its light now more purple than blue. We must stop him before he completes the final verse, Talia said, her voice strained as invisible forces pulled at her essence. Olivia stepped forward. Nathan. He paused, looking up with mild annoyance rather than surprise. Olivia. Your timing is impeccable, if unwelcome. This is madness, she said, moving cautiously closer. Whatever you think you're doing. I'm making history, Nathan interrupted. Mr. Blackwood here has agreed to fund an entirely new department under my direction. Paranormal archaeology. The scientific study of supernatural artifacts. The collector, Blackwood, regarded Olivia with clinical detachment. Professor Reed has promised a most compelling demonstration. You don't understand what you're tampering with, Olivia insisted. The eye isn't a research tool. It's dangerous. All significant discoveries are dangerous until properly harnessed, Nathan replied, returning to the papyrus. Now, if you'll excuse me. As he resumed chanting, Talia cried out in pain, her form being visibly pulled toward the eye. The blue mist from the cracked crystal reached for her like hungry tentacles. He's binding me, Talia gasped. Breaking the ancient protections. Olivia lunged forward, but Blackwood intercepted her with surprising strength for his age. The ritual must not be interrupted, he said, restraining her. The pendant's glow intensified to blinding levels. Talia's form began to disintegrate, particles of her essence streaming into the crystal. Her eyes met Olivia's, filled with desperation and the weight of 3,000 years of captivity. Remember your promise, she called, her voice growing faint. In that moment, watching Talia's suffering, Olivia understood what it truly meant to be a guardian. Not just to keep an object safe, but to protect the spirit bound to it, to honor an oath that transcended time and reason. With renewed determination, she broke free from Blackwood's grip and charged toward the eye, prepared to shatter it completely if necessary. Nathan's chanting reached a crescendo, and the room exploded in a surge of ancient power that threw them all into darkness. Consciousness returned to Olivia slowly, like rising through deep water toward a distant surface. She found herself sprawled on the cold floor of the conservation lab, emergency lights casting red shadows across overturned equipment. The acrid smell of smoke hung in the air, and distant alarms wailed through the museum corridors. She pushed herself up, wincing at the pain in her ribs. Talia? No answer came. The room was empty save for Blackwood's unconscious form near the door and Nathan slumped against a workbench, a trickle of blood running from his temple. Of the eye of Anuket, there was no sign. Panic seized Olivia as she searched the debris. Had the pendant been destroyed in the mystical backlash? Had Talia been lost forever? A faint blue glow caught her attention, emanating from beneath a fallen shelf. Pushing it aside revealed the eye, its crystal now fractured into a spiderweb of cracks that somehow held together. The blue mist inside pulsed weakly, like a fading heartbeat. Talia? Olivia whispered, gently lifting the pendant. Are you there? The mist stirred slightly. Guardian. The voice in her mind was faint, barely perceptible. The binding was interrupted. I am fading. Relief that Talia still existed quickly gave way to fresh concern. How do I help you? How do I fix this? The damage is extensive. My essence cannot remain in this fractured vessel much longer. A groan from across the room signaled Nathan regaining consciousness. His eyes focused on Olivia and the glowing pendant in her hand. Give it to me, he said, his voice ragged. We can still complete the ritual. The ritual nearly killed us all, Olivia replied, backing away. Nathan struggled to his feet. You don't understand what I've discovered. The papyrus contains knowledge beyond our imagining. The eye is just the beginning, there are others, scattered across the ancient world. With Talia's knowledge, we could find them all. And what happens to her? Olivia demanded. She becomes your slave? A tool for academic glory? She's already a prisoner, Nathan countered. Has been for 3,000 years. At least my way gives her purpose. He speaks partial truth, Talia's voice whispered in Olivia's mind. I am bound to the eye, neither truly alive nor dead. But servitude is not freedom. Olivia clutched the pendant tighter. There must be another way. Nathan took a step forward. There isn't. The binding ritual is the only method documented in any text. Without it, the spirit simply dissipates. Blackwood stirred by the door, reaching for his phone. Security will be here any moment, he said hoarsely. This situation has become untenable. Our arrangement is terminated, read. Nathan ignored him, eyes fixed on the pendant. Olivia, be reasonable. Your promise was to protect the eye. Working with me accomplishes that. I promise to protect what lies beyond the door, Olivia corrected. That's Talia. Emergency lighting flickered as the museum's backup generators struggled. In the shifting shadows, Olivia made her decision. She closed her eyes, focusing on the connection she'd formed with Talia over the past months. Is there truly no other way? She asked silently. The response came slowly. There is one possibility. In my time, when a guardian and spirit shared sufficient trust, a ritual of transference could be performed. But it carries great risk. Tell me, Olivia urged. The guardian's life force temporarily strengthens the bond, allowing the spirit to manifest fully. In that moment of manifestation, choices can be made that are otherwise impossible. What kind of choices? Freedom or a new binding of mutual consent? Talia's presence seemed to strengthen as she explained. But the ritual requires a place of power, a nexus, and the guardian risks their own essence in the process. Olivia opened her eyes. The Rosetta Gallery, she said aloud. It's built over what was once a temple to Isis. The original stones are still in the foundation. What are you talking about? Nathan demanded. Ignoring him, Olivia ran from the room, the damaged pendant clutched against her heart. Behind her, she heard Nathan's shout and his stumbling pursuit. The museum was in chaos, staff and guests being evacuated due to what security was calling an electrical incident. Olivia used the confusion to make her way to the Rosetta Gallery, now empty of visitors. In the center of the room stood the famous stone that had unlocked the Egyptian language for modern scholars, a fitting place for what she was about to attempt. Guide me, she thought to Talia as she knelt before the stone. Images and words flooded her mind, ancient rituals performed under desert stars, priestesses dancing in firelight, sacred vows spoken in long-forgotten languages. Following the memory vision, Olivia placed the cracked pendant on the floor and surrounded it with a circle of her own blood, pricked from her fingertip. I renew my promise, she whispered, the words coming from somewhere beyond conscious thought. Not as guardian to an artifact, but as friend to friend. I offer my strength that you might choose your path. The pendant began to glow more intensely, the blue light expanding to fill the circle. Olivia felt a strange pulling sensation, as if something essential was being drawn from her body. Her vision narrowed, darkening at the edges. You risk too much, Talia's voice warned in her mind. A promise is a promise, Olivia replied with a weak smile. Heavy footsteps announced Nathan's arrival. He stood panting in the doorway, witnessing the ritual with academic fascination overriding his anger. The transference, he breathed. It's not supposed to be possible in the modern era. The blue light coalesced, taking Talia's form but with greater solidity than ever before. She appeared not as a spirit but as a woman of flesh and blood, her ancient garments glowing with embedded symbols. Olivia Hayes has honored her oath, Talia announced, her voice resonating with power. The choice is now mine to make. Nathan stepped forward eagerly. The knowledge you possess is not for you, Talia interrupted. She knelt beside Olivia, who had collapsed, her life force dangerously depleted by the ritual. My first choice is to save my friend. Placing her hands on Olivia's temples, Talia closed her eyes. Energy flowed between them, Talia's glow dimming as Olivia's color returned. Olivia gasped, strength flowing back into her limbs. What are you doing? Balancing the scales, Talia replied softly. You gave of yourself for my freedom. I return what I can. Nathan moved toward the pendant, still lying in the blood circle. Then the eye is unclaimed. No, Talia said firmly. My second choice is this. She gestured toward the pendant. The cracks in the crystal sealed themselves, and the blue mist inside flared brilliantly before dissipating completely. The pendant was now just a pendant, beautiful but ordinary. "What have you done?" Nathan demanded, snatching it up. "Released the power that should never have been bound," Talia answered. "The knowledge you seek is not contained in objects, Professor Reed, but in understanding our connections to each other across time and circumstance." Nathan stared at the now mundane artifact in disbelief. "This can't be all. There must be." Museum security burst into the gallery, led by Blackwood. "That man," the collector announced, pointing at Nathan. "He damaged priceless artifacts and assaulted Professor Hayes." As Nathan was surrounded by guards, Olivia turned to Talia. The ancient priestess's form was becoming transparent again, but differently than before, not fading, but transforming. "You're leaving," Olivia said, understanding without being told. Talia nodded. "My time in this realm has reached its natural conclusion. Without the eye's magic to bind me, I return to the cycle I was denied 3 millennia ago." "I'll miss you," Olivia admitted, surprising herself with the depth of emotion behind the words. "And I you, guardian." Talia smiled. "But I leave you with a gift, the true knowledge the ancients protected. Not power over others, but insight into the threads that connect all living things across the ages." Talia placed her fading hand against Olivia's forehead. A cascade of images flooded Olivia's mind, civilizations rising and falling, wisdom gained and lost, humanity's endless cycle of discovery and forgetting. "Remember your promise," Talia said, her form now little more than shimmering light. "Not to protect an object, but to share truth. That is the sacred trust of those who study the past." "I will," Olivia promised as Talia dissolved into particles of light that spiraled upward before vanishing completely. 6 months later, Professor Olivia Hayes stood before a lecture hall filled with eager students, a simple gold necklace, carefully crafted to resemble the eye of Anuket, hanging around her neck. "Archaeology is not simply the study of objects," she began. "It is the study of promises made by those who came before us, promises embedded in how they built their homes, crafted their tools, honored their dead, and recorded their stories." She touched the necklace briefly, a habit she'd developed since returning from London. "When we unearth these artifacts, we make a promise in return, to protect not just the physical remains, but the truth they embody. To recognize that the past is never truly gone, but lives on in how we understand ourselves and our place in the world." In the back of the lecture hall, for just a moment, Olivia glimpsed a woman in ancient garments, smiling approval before melting into the crowd of students. Whether vision or memory, it didn't matter. The connection remained, a promise kept across time. "Now," she said, returning her attention to her students, "let's talk about what it really means to be guardians of history."